Thanks for joining us on the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast. This show is intended for anyone interested in cultured meat and food technologies. We're excited to have Erin Kim as the guest for today's episode. Erin has been working in cellular agriculture since 2014, when she started out as one of New Harvest's first volunteers while completing a JD at the University of Alberta. Erin's long-held interests in futurism, sustainability, global catastrophic risk mitigation, and really the love of food led her to the discovery of animal products made without animals. Following the completion of her studies, Erin took on the role of Communications Director at New Harvest full-time, where she brings a down-to-earth approach to translating the developments in New Harvest research into accessible content and community outreach. Prior to lending her talents to cellular agriculture, Erin spent time in legal advocacy at Pivot Legal Society and many years working in special education in Vancouver, Canada. Erin, I would like to welcome you to the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Erin, tell us a little bit about your role at New Harvest and how you got started in cellular agriculture.
So I'm Communications Director at New Harvest, which means I'm responsible for all of the written content that comes out of New Harvest, including a newsletter that I put out every couple of weeks, the donor updates that we provide to anyone who donates to New Harvest in any amount within the past year. That goes a little bit more in depth into the research that we fund, and our annual report, as well as social media and any other content you see that's put out by us, whether that's a blog post or something else. And I also help put together the conference that we do every year on cellular agriculture. And then just being such a small nonprofit, everyone does a little bit of everything. So that it also includes things like fundraising and all that other fun stuff that comes with being a nonprofit. And then to answer your question about how I got involved in cellular agriculture, I first heard about the idea of cultured meat back in probably 2005 or 2006. And I did not like the idea at first. I found it disgusting and kind of dystopian. But then nearly a decade later, in 2013, I was a law student at the time, and I was kind of hearing about the idea of plant-based meat and cultured meat. And I didn't realize that there were so many advances happening in those areas. And I was also kind of feeling like I wasn't that interested in practicing law. So through a weird series of coincidental encounters, I guess, I ended up meeting the professor who taught Isha Datar, our executive director of meat science at the University of Alberta. And I thought that New Harvest was this big organization in the US and that it was like staffed by, a big team of people in suits and stuff. But then he told me that actually it was just Isha Datar running it all by herself out of a small home office in Toronto. And he urged me to get in touch and thought we would work well together. And so I did that. And to my surprise, she responded to my email, and I started volunteering for New Harvest pretty much right away. And I just found it so interesting and exciting that I knew I wanted to kind of work in that field after. And so I ended up finishing law school. And then as soon as I wrote my last exam, I literally ran home, packed everything I owned, and then moved down to New York to join the team full time.
In reference to a blog post New Harvest published earlier this year, how has the overall New Harvest brand and mission changed over the last few years, especially now that more organizations and institutions are investing in cellular agriculture?
It has changed quite a bit. So back in those early days, and to be clear, New Harvest was founded in 2004, but it wasn't a super active public-facing organization until Isha came on as executive director in 2013. And so in those earlier days of, I would say, 2013 to 2015-ish, hardly anybody knew about cellular agriculture or cultured meat. And in fact, the phrase cellular agriculture hadn't even come into existence until 2015, when stuff was just starting to happen in this field, and we needed a way to capture all of the ideas of not just cultured meat, but also cultured leather and milk and eggs and other animal proteins produced from methods including fermentation and things like that. And so we needed just like this one catchy phrase to capture all of that. And so Isha kind of crowdsourced that on a Facebook page that we had at the time. And a bunch of ideas came and went. In those early days, we also were kind of throwing around the term the post-animal bioeconomy, which some people might remember. And that's kind of it's kind of faded out too. But in those early days, the language and the messaging was just more about getting awareness out. And it was very about the potential benefits of cellular agriculture. And I mean, we were also younger people at the time and probably a little bit more wide-eyed. And I think it was more, I guess, with being grounded in science and that has kind of cemented over time because we've matured as an organization, we've matured as a field, although I still think there is a long way to go in that regard. And then we've also just matured as people. And I think that like the way we were talking about it as people in like our early and mid 20s is a little bit different now that we have a little more experience under our belts now. Over the years, New Harvest has really, our messaging has become a lot more grounded in science, which I think is very important as an organization which funds scientific research. And I actually, in my last year of law school, I took a course on biotech policy with an amazing professor at the University of Alberta named Tim Caulfield. And he was hugely influential on me in the way that I now communicate about science. And as a volunteer, before I took his class, and of course the field looked very different then. We didn't get as many media mentions, and if somebody even knew what cultured meat was in a conversation like that, that was like a nice surprise. And now I think a lot of people have like a general idea of what it is, but at the time, like any story, any positive media mention was something really exciting for us. But I think now we've become a lot more discerning about what kinds of media engagements we take on, what kinds of speaking engagements we take on. And it's a very sensitive field. And there's a lot of, as people and organizations talking about cellular agriculture and cultured meat, like that comes with a lot of responsibility because the average person just does not have the technical knowledge behind cultured meat. And so I think most lay people, you have no other option but to defer to the expertise of whoever's talking about it. And the gravity of that responsibility has really just become cemented for us over the years. And so the lessons that I've learned from Tim Caulfield and others, just about responsible science communication and not overhyping things and looking at, the sources that are being cited when any kind of a claim is being made. All of those kinds of things are very important to me as a communications director for New Harvest. I think also with so many more people in the field and so much more activity taking place, I think that's a really great thing because it gives everybody more room and more freedom to have their own style and have their own perspective. And so it's not like any one person or group out there is the gospel, and there's differences of opinion, which I think is great, and I actually wish there was more of in this field, and that's true both within New Harvest and outside of it. And I think that's something that's really special and amazing about New Harvest is that there is room in our organization for it's a really small organization of just 3 people at this time, but we all come from very different backgrounds, and we find we're excited by a lot of the same things, but then there's different things about this field that are exciting to us as well. And if you ask anyone in the field, they're going to have probably slightly different opinions on things like when products will be on the market and what those products might look like, and all the different considerations that come up in these kinds of conversations. And I think that's a great thing.
New Harvest is a leader in the space when educating people about cultured meat and clean meat. And I remember when I was first looking, just general information about it, New Harvest, the New Harvest graphics and website and description of really what it is and a basic rundown of how it's made was one of the first things I saw, and it was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think we've really laid a foundation for people's basic understanding of cultured meat and other concepts in cellular agriculture. And lately, I've been seeing a lot more mentions in media articles and in just the public conversations about cultured meat, about vascularization, which is the formation of blood vessels in any animal tissue. And, that will be something that's necessary if we want to make thicker and more complex cuts of meat, like a steak or a chicken breast, rather than just the little ground meatball and hamburger types of products. So I thought that was really a great development because we had started talking about vascularization as far back as 2015 when one of our fellows was doing some experiments on that in her research. And I really think that the resources that we were putting out there, the photos that were coming straight out of the lab, and the content that we were putting out on that research, I think that really equipped the people who are watching this space with just a base of knowledge to understand the significance of that and what it means. And it really helps, I think, in getting that message across to people that it can sound very simple when you're describing the idea of cultured meat. And it sounds like, if you can grow this stuff inside an animal's body, of course, why wouldn't you be able to grow it outside of it? And it's a good thing for it to sound simple in some contexts, but the reality of it is any type of scientific research, it's not so straightforward. It's not so easy to predict. It costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time and very specific expertise that isn't necessarily so easy to find. And so just being able to bring more depth to people's understanding of cultured meat, I think is, something that New Harvest has been able to do. And I think that that's a very important role that we're happy to play in this field.
Let's talk about the marketing. We hear the industry refer to lab-grown meat in many different ways. And regardless of what the public will be calling lab-grown meat in the future, what's really the best way to refer to lab-grown meat or clean meat or cultured meat today?
Well, to be clear, I'm not a marketer. I do communications for New Harvest, and New Harvest is a nonprofit. We're not one of the players in this field who are aiming to put out a tangible product on the market for sale. What we do is we fund open, collaborative academic research on the science of cultured meat. And for that and other reasons, we've stuck with the scientific terminology of cultured meat. But to answer your question of what's the best thing to call it, honestly, I think anyone can call it anything that they want. We've been around for long enough to have seen a lot of the terminology come and go. So a few years ago, there were mostly news articles, and I don't know where they come up with these names, but they were using the word schmeat and frankenmeat and in vitro meat, which I think some people still use, but it seems to have kind of fallen out of trend. And then more recently, we've really seen this aggressive push for clean meat to be used. And it's not a big secret. I'm not a fan of that word, and I don't use it. New Harvest doesn't. You'll notice we never use that term, but others in this field and industry seem to really like it. However, a lot of people outside of it don't seem to like it. And I think that's something that should really be taken note of. And I would look into the reasons why and maybe engage in some respectful conversations around that. But honestly, I think anyone can call it anything you want. I am more comfortable with cultured. And I think that this field is at such an early stage that who knows what other terminology is going to come and go. And I think that we're also so attached to these products, speculative products, I might add, being exactly like meat. And they haven't quite been exactly like meat that you would get from an animal. And so I actually wouldn't be too surprised if some totally new type of terminology arises when we get to the point of a product actually being ready for the market. And honestly, there's no way of really knowing when that time will come about because people have been making predictions about the commercial availability of cultured meat for a very, very long time. And there were people who were pretty certain that there would be a product 5 years after the unveiling of the cultured beef hamburger in 2013. And it's 2018. It's now 5 years, and there hasn't been really the kind of necessary breakthroughs that would make that possible. And there's all of these unforeseen hurdles as well that are coming up, like how it's going to be regulated, the consumer perception and IP issues and other hurdles that, the science alone is enough of a challenge. And then to add in all of these other factors, those can all affect the timelines as well.
To my surprise, a lot of times when I talk about cultured meat to just, the general public, they'll respond to me and they'll say, "Oh, you mean like the Impossible Burger," which is a plant-based burger. But that, from a marketing standpoint, they're doing such a good job, and people don't really even know the difference there.
I'm actually personally quite confused as well about what the intention of clean meat is. Like, is it intended to also include plant-based? Because when it's used in some contexts, it seems to mean plant-based, and then in others, it means apparently cultured. And that confusion also, I'm not interested in encouraging that. And, cultured meat might not be the most market-friendly, sexy phrase, but the meat itself is something that will be produced from cell culture. And I think people understand that it's not cultured in the sense that yogurt is or other fermented products are. So it might not be the perfect term for now, but I think it's the best we have for where the stage that the industry currently is at. When the time comes and when there is an actual product or products out there, who knows how those are going to be branded? It might be called something totally different. I don't see why it needs to latch on to our current understandings of meat. But that's just an opinion. And if you ask me in like a few weeks, I might even feel differently.
So, we're seeing fast food chains like Sonic, for example, and what they're doing is they're blending their beef patties with a mushroom-based meat extender, as I think they call it. And so when cultured meat hits the fast food chains, do you think that will be a big wave of people calling it the, lab-grown meat Big Mac? Or do you think that they'll switch over as if nothing has changed?
I honestly have no clue. I think only time will tell. And, people love to speculate in this space, but we just won't know until we're ready. And right now, we're not ready. I think I find that second scenario you mentioned where it just switches over as if nothing happened, I find that very unlikely. I think that as more people are becoming aware of cultured meat, more questions are arising. That's something that it's reasonable that would happen. It's good and fine, and we'll see more of that. And I think that people will want to know whether the product was produced from cell culture or sourced from an animal. And I think that, like anything in food, because there are trust issues in food that go beyond just cellular agriculture, and people want to know what's in their food, where it came from, how it was made. And I think that producers should have pride in the product that they're making, and it shouldn't be something that you would want to hide, or it should be something that you take pride in talking about. Like, for example, I've heard Ryan Pandya from Perfect Day Foods talk about how he really embraces the fact that they use GMO, and it's not something that they want to gloss over. If cultured meat's going to be as great as it's being promised, then why not label it as such and just be proud of that? But again, that's totally speculative. We won't know until we get there.
So if someone is interested in studying cellular agriculture, are there any universities that you may know of that offer special programs with a focus on the topic? And what is really the best way that New Harvest gets in touch with different research projects?
This is probably a better question for Kate Kruger, our research director. And as of right now, there are no universities with an actual program, like courses being offered in cellular agriculture and degrees being granted. And that's something that New Harvest, through our research efforts, is really trying to change incrementally. We definitely, in the foreseeable future, would like to have more universities offer like a degree program and graduate programs in cellular agriculture. But right now, there isn't really a formal way to get educated specifically in cellular agriculture. And the best way to get that is actually through a New Harvest fellowship. So anyone that's interested in that should get in touch with our research director, Kate Kruger. Currently, we're funding research at the University of Ottawa in Canada, at North Carolina State University in North Carolina, Kent State University in Ohio, 2 fellows actually at Tufts, just outside of Boston, and 1 at Bath University in the UK. I mean, I don't think having 1 researcher or even 2 is enough to say, oh, this university is a leader. It's exciting and it's wonderful, but I think that it's going to take a lot more than that. And I think that's okay. I mean, we only launched the research fellowship program in 2015, and it's already in that time grown to 6 full-time researchers. Plus, we have these new categories where we're seeking grant applications for a postdoctoral fellowship, for seed grants, which are like shorter-term projects. And we granted our first seed grant in the fall of 2017 at the University of British Columbia. So there's quite a geographic spread. We definitely are open to funding elsewhere and internationally. And in terms of what kinds of backgrounds the researchers are coming from, they're all scientists and or engineers. So we haven't funded any non-scientific research in quite a while. And that focus towards scientific research in academia is another kind of pivot that we took, or a focus that took shape over time. And, you know, a lot of people want to serve this field in a lot of ways, but what it needs most desperately, I think all of us at New Harvest can agree, and a lot of people in the industry can agree, is that there's a real shortage of the scientific expertise coming out. And that's something that we are trying to solve through our research fellowship, where, you know, these are the people who are going to go off to start companies and become CTOs at companies. And all of the companies that exist right now also need to be hiring experts and people with experience in this type of animal cell culture. And other than what New Harvest is doing, there isn't like a stream of that taking place. So
there's a lot of different benefits to pursue cultured meat. And for you personally, what is the most exciting driving force? Is it the environmental aspects, the health aspects? What really gets you excited about it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of benefits, but there's also a lot of risks. It's not the most stable field. It could honestly like go poof. It's not a given. I think what initially got me interested was the fact, I love animals. I went through this phase of being like, not even a total vegetarian, but I was cutting a lot of meat out of my diet around the time that I discovered the plant-based and cultured meat in 2013. And so I was really excited about the benefits for animals and the environment. But over time, I have really come to appreciate the science and the excitement of being a small nonprofit doing like big and crazy things. And I've learned so much on that journey. And I'm actually really glad not to be coming at it from that vegetarian kind of lens, because not coming from that place actually it opens so many doors. It just enables you to have really meaningful engagement with meat producers and other meat eaters and people who work in the meat industry, just because there's understandably some tension there. And when you can kind of help those people that you're interacting with, like, put their guard down because they know you're not coming at them from an adversarial place, it's just so much more productive and peaceful. And, I eat meat, and I have a real appreciation for how amazing and delicious meat and animal products are. And it's not going to be easy to compete with those products. And I say this as somebody who, when I was coming from that place of appreciating plant-based foods because it meant something to me because of my love of animals, I noticed myself making a lot of basically telling myself that I liked these foods, even though taste-wise, they weren't really competitive. That's just my opinion. I don't mean to, I speak for any demographic when I say that, but or to hurt any feelings. But in my opinion, like I don't eat those products anymore. I love a full fat like dairy yogurt, and I love, you know, the occasional piece of meat, and it, like the smell of it, and like the experience of eating like a steak. It's something that it's going to be very, very difficult to replicate, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done before we can get there. And instead of finding that daunting, I'm actually really excited by just how much of a challenge that is. But I want us to be honest with ourselves about how much work it's going to take, and that it's not going to be something that happens overnight. If we want to make really good products that can really compete, I think we need to be kind of hard on ourselves and critical, and expose ourselves to the scrutiny of meat eaters and the meat industry, and have real conversations, and not just talk about how great this is going to be for the environment and animals, because those are great things. And you're going to reach a few people who are willing to pay a high price because that strikes a chord in them emotionally. But there's just a lot more people who have a more pragmatic approach to food, and also just who are in it for reasons that are harder to quantify and even describe. So there just, I think, needs to be a little bit more empathy and patience and understanding of that. So I think there's a long way to go for that in this field, because it's still really small, and I don't think we've quite won over the meat eating general public. You know, they're curious, and they're watching, I think, some of them. And I think it sounds like a nice idea, but when you're actually experiencing the product, if it doesn't taste good, it's not going to fly. The other day, actually, I have to say, I went to this tasting for a cricket burger. It was really bad. And me and like the other people who were at this tasting, like it was this kind of interesting, like future food experience that was like novel. So, you know, you take a few bites and it's like, okay, cool. I'm eating this burger that's been made out of crickets, but you don't want to keep eating it. Or at least I didn't. And everybody there did not want to keep eating it. And we need to be prepared for scenarios like that. And if it doesn't taste good and make people feel good when they're eating it, it's not going to have the impact that is being promised today. That probably sounds pretty downer.
You know, one thing I was going to mention is that the thought of eating a cricket chip, because I've seen the cricket powder chips, it doesn't sound so bad.
Oh, I like those chips. No, those
right.
Personally, I like those.
But when you mention cricket burger, that just sounds, it does not sound very good. So
I know. And like while I was eating it, I was like, there were moments where I'm like, okay, that was the leg. Or like, okay, that was exoskeleton. And I was like,
but it is completely refined into a powder, isn't it?
You know, maybe it is, but, and you know what, maybe that was my perception of it as I was eating it. So maybe it wasn't a leg, but in my mind, I was like, oh God, all I can think about is cricket legs. And I should mention, like, I like the chips. I love chirps. It just didn't quite translate into a burger. It was cool though. Like I commend the effort and like, I'm glad to have tried it, but, never would I order that in a restaurant, or even like, it would take a lot of hunger for me to like want to eat that, you know?
Yes.
I really don't mean to like hurt any feelings here, but feelings are going to get hurt if we just kind of blindly keep going ahead with this, like, this is going to save the world, this is going to taste better and be better. And it's like, yeah, we all hope for that, but it's going to be hard. And there's going to be a lot of criticism and disappointment along the way.
What do you see as the biggest success in cellular agriculture that we've seen thus far?
Scientifically speaking, there has not yet been a breakthrough that's been made public. So unfortunately, I don't think that like a significant enough advancement has been made that's going to really, move those timelines forward. But I think regardless of that, the fact that there's now an international community of scientists that are working on this, through the New Harvest Fellowship. And there are others as well. So like Shojin Meat, who are really awesome and very cool people. They're doing some very exciting research in Japan. And I mean, just getting even just the inquiries from scientists and PIs, like that's huge, because those are exactly the people that we need if cultured meat is really to develop into something that's real beyond the prototype level. So yeah, that's exciting. I also just like that. I like seeing the unusual suspects take an interest in this field, which, sad to say, that's like meat eaters. Like I would love to just have more meat eaters, meat producers, hunters, and people who go to like barbecue festivals. Like those are the people you want to be reaching. And that's not going to be a super easy sell. It's one thing to get them interested in the idea, but for them to actually, and for them to make statements like, yeah, I would try that, but I would try that does not mean I would pay X amount of money for it on a regular basis. I like seeing the more interest from those kinds of demographics rise, and I think that's going to be really necessary. We're seeing a lot more international interest, and just like it is really freeing. And I say this like from that communications perspective, to like have the public, for them to have a better understanding of what cellular agriculture is, because in all honesty, it was getting pretty old just doing the same old talk year after year, where it's like, okay, the Winston Churchill quote, all right, the 4 steps that are necessary to make cultured meat happen. It's like, okay, we all kind of know that now. Let's talk about more interesting stuff. And the speculation, I think, also is getting a little tiresome. I like to see new, fresh, interesting content in this space. And like some of that comes from people like Oron Katz, who I'm a huge fan of. He's an artist. He uses tissue culture in his art. And he went through this trajectory of being really excited and wide-eyed about cultured meat in his earlier years. And then over time, he became kind of skeptical and critical, and he likes to call out bullshit in this space. And like, I think it's fascinating. It's entertaining. He really gives amazing food for thought, and his talks are just so funny. And, you know, they prompt the audience to just ask themselves questions, which I think we need to be asking. And like, I love that stuff like that's happening. And here's another thing that I think really distinguishes New Harvest is we're not afraid of critique, and we're not afraid of viewpoints that aren't so optimistic and so positive, because not everything is going to be wonderful and amazing, and we certainly want it to be, but like, let's be realistic here, and let's be honest with ourselves, and let's open ourselves up to the critical stuff, you know, so that we can do the best job possible. It makes us a stronger organization, and it makes for a stronger field and industry, I think, in the long term. And it doesn't mean that you wish ill for the industry. It's just the opposite. You want to make it stronger. And so I like to see when the odd like critical news article comes out, as someone who works in this field, like I'm definitely more cautious and conservative and more critical, I think, than most people in this field. And I think that that's necessary. I think that we need people who are in it, who can empathize with that view, because it's out there in the world, and you need to be engaging with people who share different perspectives and opinions from your own. And I mean, I find that very exciting, and I would like to see more of it.
So there's an upcoming conference hosted by New Harvest. Tell us about the event and what attendees can expect at the event.
Yeah, so a few years ago, we realized that there was a real need, because so much of this community, it lives online. There are not enough opportunities for people to kind of come together and just be in one room, getting on the same page about where the state of the research is at, and, you know, being able to interact face to face with each other. So in 2015, we had the idea of holding the first Cellular Agriculture Conference. And so that first one was held in 2016, and it became an annual thing. So our first was in San Francisco in 2016. Our second was in just this past fall in New York, and our third is going to be this summer in Boston. So that's just, I would say, whether you're totally new to the industry or you've been in it for a while, it's like the event to go to where you're getting kind of the updates on research, as well as there's always these topics that like come and go that are hot. So it seems like regulation and policy and IP issues are on a lot of people's minds in the industry right now. And so we curate really great experts to speak at these events and lend their kind of expertise to cellular agriculture. And it serves everybody really well. We attract a lot of investors and prospective consumers, donors, of course, scientists, academics, and the media, of course. And it kind of just like gets everybody like the primer that they're looking for on cellular agriculture. And it's a great way to just like actually meet and interact with everybody that's involved in cellular agriculture. So I would really recommend that for anybody who's even remotely interested. We always make it fun too. So it's not some dry academic thing. It's fun. It's accessible. We talk about the science, but in a way that's understandable, and there's lighter content as well. So, and exhibitions, really interactive, like sensory stuff. And this year it's going to be at the MIT Media Lab, which is really cool and exciting.
Cool. And what are the dates and what's the best way to get more information or register for the conference?
Yep. So it'll be held July 20th and 21st at the MIT Media Lab just outside of Boston. Unfortunately, the early bird registration has now passed, but regular tickets are available at the conference website, it's http://2018.new-harvest.org, or you can just go to our website, and that conference website is linked on there. And if you are a student or an academic in cellular agriculture, or just an academic of any kind, whether you're a PI or a postdoc, we have a really, really generous academic rate of $100 for both days. And then if you're a biohacker doing science anywhere, you're also eligible for that biohacker and student rate. And if you want it, you can just email us at hello@new-harvest.org, and we'll set that up for you. We really want to make it accessible to as many people as possible.
You can get in touch with Erin on LinkedIn or by visiting New Harvest's website at new-harvest.org. Erin, do you have any last insights for our listeners?
We're a nonprofit, and everything we do is possible only through the generosity of literally still less than 700 people around the world. And there are people who give anywhere from literally $1 a month to, people who give in larger amounts. And every single one of those people receives our monthly donor update, which that contains content that doesn't necessarily get shared on social media or on our newsletter. So there's exclusive content and insights there that are of like real value, I think, to anyone who's like really interested in this space. And all of the research that we fund, like that money, it doesn't come out of thin air. It comes out of the generosity of people who are motivated by lots of different reasons to give. So if you want this science to advance and you like, learning about concepts like vascularization and just kind of getting that inside view of like what the research at this stage of the game looks like, I really don't think there's a better place to get it than New Harvest. I mean, I'm biased because I write the content myself, but yeah, people seem pretty happy with it.
Erin, thank you so much for being with us today on the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
This is your host, Alex, and we look forward to being with you on our next episode.